When we talk about the problem of obesity and possible solutions, it is very important for you always to go back and remember that energy balance equation. People who have not formally studied nutrition or obesity often mistakenly believe that the solution to weight problems is simply to balance energy in versus energy out. Hopefully, in this class, it has become very clear to you that the energy outside of the equation has more elements on it than simply physical activity. The basal metabolic rate is one of those items that is on the energy outside of the equation. And something you want to do is protect that BMR. One of the ways that people unintentionally lower their BMR is through restrictive dieting. Adaptive thermogenesis is the body's ability to create heat through the way that it's burning off food. Physical activity through exercise and NEAT are the items on the energy outside of the equation that people have the most control over. Other items that we're not seeing on the energy outside of the equation would include your genetics and epigenetics. At this time, we classify obesity based on a person's body mass index. The body mass index is a number that takes into account how tall you are and how much you weigh. People who have a body mass index that is greater than or equal to 30 are considered obese. There are then 3 different levels, class 1, 2, and 3 of obesity. People who have a body mass index that is greater than or equal to 40 are considered morbidly obese. It's important to recognize that this classification system is a generalization for people of all ages. However, if you choose to work with people who are in the elder group over age 65, at that point, an acceptable BMI range is between 23 and 30. So it's a little more accepted to carry a little extra weight. It's actually protective when you're over age 65. But when you're under age 65, you want the BMI to primarily be 24.9 to 18.5. Obesity is related to frequency of disease and also to severity of disease. This is another slide that shows you some of the disease states that are associated with obesity. This would include dyslipidemia, metabolic syndrome, asthma, GERD, gallbladder disease, pancreatitis, breast, uterine, and colon cancer, osteoarthritis, gout, and type 2 diabetes. In pediatric obesity, we see the same comorbidities and at times even greater implications. 33% of child cases of gallstones are also child cases of pediatric obesity. 50% of childhood cases of steatohepatitis are also cases that include pediatric obesity. It's also important to recognize that there can be emotional and overall in general life disturbances when children are obese. We cannot deny that genetics play a role in body size. Genetics are known to affect appetite, body size itself, meaning height and skeletal size, metabolism, as well as preferences for food, preferences for dieting, and your propensity for physical activity. However, genetics cannot be the only cause for the obesity condition that we have in the world at this time, because obesity has increased over the last 30 years. Obesity is a complex trait that is influenced by many different genes. Remember that the phenotype is the observable trait. That is what you see, such as brown eyes or blonde hair. The genotype is the genetic combination. This is the actual genes that cause the observable trait to present. Epigenetics is a study of the processes that control gene expression without altering DNA profile. Research is currently showing that a combination of genetic and epigenetic information may have a greater utility for complex trait prediction. And remember, obesity is a complex trait. In April of 2003, the Human Genome Project was completed. The International HapMap project is now identifying genes that are associated with health and disease, and people studying obesity are using this data. At this time, 20 to 30 different gene mutations could result in different multiple obesity phenotypes. The more we continue to study the information from the Human Genome Project, the more information we will have about this complex condition, obesity. So your genetics are what's given to you. You can't change them, but you can change the way that you live your life. Genetics are related to accumulation of fat and muscles and the liver, but interactions between genes and the environment have been shown and have been studied. Remember the example of the Pima Indians that we talked about earlier in class. When that river was dammed up, part of the Indians were left on one side in Mexico, and the other part of the Indian tribe stayed on the United States side of the line. There were significant differences in their diet and lifestyles, and the Indians that were on the American side of the border have higher levels of obesity. They also have very different diets and very different lifestyles. So their genetics remained the same, but something about their lifestyle changed significantly. Some people like to say genetics load the gun and environment shoots it. I like to think about genetics as the hand of cards that you're dealt, and how you play the game matters. People who play any type of card game know that the best dealt hand of cards isn't always the hand of cards that wins. It's how you play the game that matters. A question that arises in society sometimes today is whether or not obesity is contagious. There are some viruses that can alter metabolism. One of these is adenovirus 36. 30% of obese people had it, compared to 10% of non-obese people in a study. Twins have been shown that when infected with the virus, one identical twin will be heavier and fatter than the other twin who is not infected with the virus. Adenovirus 36 alters fat cells so that they accumulate fat more and more rapidly. They also multiply more easily. There is a stigma that is often associated with obesity. People who are obese are more likely to have depression, to feel loneliness, to have a low sense of self-esteem, to have unhealthy eating behaviors, and to continue unhealthy eating behaviors. In fact, people with obesity who feel stigmatized may avoid future healthcare services if they have had a negative experience of stigma from a healthcare provider. When we took our class objectives survey at the beginning of the semester, 62% of you wanted to learn how to help obese people manage their weight and improve their health. And 31% of you wanted to be able to better explain reasons why obesity is prevalent in society now. Understanding how the human body regulates both eating behaviors and body weight will help you with both of those objectives. And here's your friend, the energy balance equation. We go back to this over and over and over again because it's very complicated to balance energy in with energy out. You don't have control over everything on the energy outside of the equation. The one element that you have control over on the energy outside of the equation is physical activity. And while physical activity is the most modifiable of the items on the energy outside of the equation, it doesn't account for the highest level of calories burned. That goes to the BMR. That is accounting for 60 to 75% of the calories that are burned. If you look on this slide, the BMR is the largest part of this pie chart. It is the peacock blue color. So protecting that basal metabolic rate is very important. On this slide, you see a little graphic that shows how the different nutrients, lipids, amino acids, which come from proteins, and glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, are used within the body. If you start on the left, there's the nutrient source. In the center, we have the nutrients being distributed in the bloodstream. And on the far right, you see the destination. What I want you to remember from this slide is that all three of the macronutrients, lipids, amino acids, and glucose, all three of them can have a final destination in the adipose tissue. Lipids definitely go to adipose tissue. It's their primary destination. They also go to skeletal muscle. Amino acids, those are from proteins. Those can go to all tissues. That includes adipose tissue. And glucose, this is from carbohydrates, goes to all tissues, including adipose tissue. Anything that you eat in excess has the possibility or the potential to be stored in energy reserves in adipose tissue. On this slide, you see a very effective description visually of how set point theory helps a person resist weight loss and be programmed to regain weight. If you look at the far left, you see a woman of average size. You then see that she's dieting, she's stepping down, and she gets to a very thin silhouette. But when she starts to eat regular amounts of calories again, you can see she returns to where she started from. But then she actually gains more weight, and her body has a new set point. Set point theory can explain the phenomena where people claim to weigh more after a diet. It's all related to the role that the brain plays and the body plays. Adipose tissue is recognized as an active endocrine organ. It is sending messages to the brain about its size, and its goal is to maintain and defend its size. So if you go on a severely restricted, very low calorie diet, the adipose tissue will recognize this and send messages to the brain to defend its size. Within the brain, the hypothalamus has receptors for insulin and leptin. This is involved in hunger, in appetite, and in satiety. Subcutaneous fat, or the fat just below the skin, is part of the endocrine system. It secretes leptin. Leptin is a hormone that plays a key role in the regulation of energy intake. Leptin influences the appetite, and it also influences metabolism. Leptin is one of the most important adipose-derived hormones. Remember that adipose tissue is not inert. Adipose tissue is one of the most metabolically active tissues in the human body. Its endocrine functions have a major impact on the majority of complications that are related to obesity. Each adipocyte, or fat cell, is remarkable in that it can store excess energy in the form of lipids, and it can drastically increase in size. Adipocytes are not only responsive to central and peripheral metabolic signals, but they are also capable of secreting protein and non-protein compounds. Proteins produced by adipocytes, which we call adipokines, have a variety of systemic, peripheral, and local effects. Adipose tissue is able to integrate signals from other organs and respond by secreting different proteins, including hormones. Your body can continue to build and grow adipocytes or adipose tissue throughout your entire life. A non-committed stem cell, or an adipoblast, in the presence of insulin and cortisol, can go on to become an adipocyte or fat cell. Leptin is a hormone that is secreted by adipose tissue. It is related to energy metabolism. Leptin relays messages about energy storage levels to the brain. When leptin is low, and it would be low when a person is fasting or when they're in a state of weight loss or on a very low calorie diet, when leptin is low, the drive to eat is increased. So what do you remember about this? When you think back on this class, it is important to remember that there is a relationship between the adipose tissue, the brain, and a person's weight status. The adipose tissue is an active endocrine organ, and it is sending messages to the brain, trying to preserve itself and defend its size. When we consider how to help obese people manage their weight today, the possibility of using pharmacological interventions is bound to rise. There's a huge market right now of supplements that promote weight loss. Research confirms that when obese individuals adopt healthier eating and physical activity patterns, health benefits are retained even if they regain some of the weight. This is a major factor behind the health at every size approach. The documented failure of most weight loss programs and the toll this takes on a person's self-esteem cannot be overlooked. In 1959, this was 60 years ago, a review of obesity treatment programs then found that 95% of the obese in treatment who lost weight would regain it in 5 years. Not much has changed. Recent studies find that about 1/3 of obese dieters regain lost weight within a year and return to their initial weight within 3 to 5 years. So when you're designing interventions for weight management, you want to base them on sound principles of behavior change. There may possibly, however, be a role for pharmacology. Pharmacological interventions should be considered an adjunct therapy in a weight management program. This means they should be supplemental to physical activity and intake management. Pharmacological interventions are only recommended for people who have a body mass index greater than or equal to 30. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act requires the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to ensure the safety and the effectiveness of all new drugs. In addition to pharmacological interventions, there is also a classification of supplements. Supplements are defined by the FDA as a product that is intended to supplement the diet, and it's providing a vitamin, a mineral, an amino acid, an herb or botanical, or some combination of those. There is currently no evidence to support the effectiveness of use of supplements for weight loss. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, the DSHEA of 1994, states that the FDA must show that a supplement is unsafe before it can be marketed. It is very important to recognize that in the United States, supplements do not follow standardized formats, and contents may vary in potency from company to company and also from batch to batch within a company. This is in stark contrast to the regulation of supplements in Germany, where supplements are based on identical formulas and must be identical from company to company and from batch to batch. At this time, the DSHEA permits 3 types of supplement claims to be made: nutrient content claims, health claims, and structure function claims. On table 10.2 in your book, which is on page 315, there's a table that breaks out supplements that claim weight loss. And if you look at this table, you will see that all of the supplements that claim weight loss properties, the research shows that they are inconclusive or have no effect. This would include caffeine, chromium, and fiber. Pyruvate does show a very small effect when combined with exercise. That table is on page 315 in your book. It's table 10.2, and it outlines supplements that claim weight loss properties. It's a great reason to keep this book after you've finished the class. When you consider pharmacological interventions for weight loss or weight management, it is important to remember that it will take many approaches, not just a pharmacological supplement or a supplement to promote weight loss. People need to have very realistic goals, and they also need to incorporate lifestyle changes and physical activity into their weight management program. People need to expect to regain some weight when they stop taking the pharmacological intervention. Always remember and recognize that supplements are very casually regulated in the United States. And most importantly, always remember that very low calorie diets may have an undesirable negative effect of creating a long-term decrease in the basal metabolic rate. In addition to pharmacological interventions, there are also surgical interventions for weight management, and there may be times where you find that this is the appropriate intervention for a client. In general terms, bariatric surgery is typically restricting the size of the stomach to create a smaller stomach. It may also be restricting the size of the small intestine, which is where nutrients are absorbed. The effects of surgeries for bariatrics are restricting intake and malabsorption of nutrients. This is an alteration of the GI tract, at times a permanent alteration of the GI tract. If someone is considering bariatric surgery, you want to take a look at several things before you recommend bariatric surgery. Typically, you're looking at a person who has a body mass index greater than or equal to 40 or greater than or equal to 35 with comorbidities. Most importantly, you want to see proof that lifestyle changes did not work for this person. You want to make sure that the person made a valiant effort at modifying their lifestyle and changing their levels of physical activity with a good, solid support system, such as yourself as a nutrition professional, prior to recommending surgery, because many surgeries are permanent alterations of the GI tract. You also have to make sure that the person is committed to permanent change, because a permanent change in the GI tract is going to require permanent changes and behaviors on their part for the rest of their life, including taking many vitamins. You want to make sure that they don't have any psychopathology present, and they have to be aware of any other conditions they may have that may make them a risk for bariatric surgery, such as anemia. There are complications that are associated with all bariatric surgeries. The pouch, although it may be severely restricted and reduced in size of the stomach, that pouch is still capable of stretching back to its original size. So overeating repetitively could potentially stretch that stomach right back out to its original size. People who repetitively eat more than the stomach pouch can hold may experience vomiting. Band and staples that are inserted into various parts of the stomach and GI tract can fall apart and reverse the procedure unintentionally. Stomach contents could then leak into the abdomen. Gallstones have been noted with excessive weight loss. And nutritional deficiencies and related health problems are one of the greatest complications of all bariatric surgeries. And this is a result of malnutrition from malabsorption of nutrients. People who have procedures such as a Roux-en-Y must take vitamins and mineral supplements for the remainder of their life. This is a significant cost to the person, and also one additional thing that they must remember to do on a daily basis after having bariatric surgery. Regardless of whether you recommend for a client a pharmacological intervention and/or bariatric surgery, you will always include a physical activity component in your weight management program for people who are struggling to manage their weight. Physical activity metabolizes fat stores, thus decreasing the size of fat stores while simultaneously increasing lean body mass. Muscle burns more calories than fat. These two changes in tandem can help a person achieve or maintain a normal metabolic rate. Remember, on the energy outside of the energy balance equation, the item that you have the most control over is physical activity. Most of the energy needed to support metabolism is generated from carbs and fats in the citric acid cycle and the electron transport chain. In the very first minutes of physical activity or exercise, before the aerobic metabolism is fully powered up, carbs, creatine phosphate, and stored ATP are used as the body's fuel. As the metabolism powers up, lipid oxidation increases, gradually surpassing carbohydrates as the fuel source. This is where fat burning begins. When you exercise moderately, about 65% of your VO2 max, lipids are the primary fuel burned. When you exercise intensively, in excess of 65% of VO2 max, muscle glycogen will be broken down and exceed the use of lipids. You will use your stored carbohydrates when you exercise intensively. However, fat oxidation will then occur with EPOC after bouts of high intensity activity. EPOC is excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. So consider this: you burn more fats during low to moderate activities, such as walking for 35 to 45 minutes, than you do in a high intensity activity, such as sprinting for 2 to 5 minutes. You want to be able to explain that to clients when you're helping them put together that physical activity component of their weight management program. You want to help these clients understand that walking for 35 to 45 minutes every day could be more beneficial for them than sprinting for 2 to 5 minutes, and it may be a more reasonable activity for them to program into their life. One of the most reliable predictors for a person's weight management success is whether or not they maintain a consistent physical activity program. And while most people are going to regain some of the weight that they lose, it is important to remember that people who make physical activity part of their daily lifestyle regain less weight than their peers who do not keep physical activity as part of their daily lifestyle. Remember, on that energy outside of the equation, the item that you have the most control over is physical activity. Here's the energy balance equation one more time. Now we're going to talk about how you can help people with the energy in side of the equation, calories in. When you talk about the energy inside of the equation, you want to help people begin to focus on healthy eating patterns. As an educated nutritional professional, you will not be recommending that people fast, or you probably most likely will not be recommending that they go on a diet lower than 1,200 calories per day. When people enter that very low calorie diet or fasting state, the BMR goes down. Food-seeking behavior is also increased, and the desire to do physical activity goes down. There have also been noted psychiatric changes, including depression and obsessive compulsive behaviors, and compensatory eating upon the presentation of food. There's also an increased propensity to binge when people are on very low calorie diets, and people lose less weight and fat than they would expect to lose. If you want a refresher on this, go back and visit the Ansel Keys starvation experiment. So in the feasting state, and this is not feasting like a Thanksgiving feast, this is a state where you're eating as opposed to a fasting state where you're not eating. When a person is eating regularly timed meals, the BMR can go up. For non-obese, spontaneous physical activity could actually increase over several days when people are eating on a regular basis, and food-seeking behavior turns off. Feasting, or regularly timed eating of meals, is the ideal and preferred approach to a healthy eating pattern. When we promote healthy eating patterns, we are promoting normal eating. We do not want to promote disordered eating or eating disorders. An eating disorder is a diagnosed illness. Disordered eating tends to be a bad habit or a reaction to a situation. Education can result in change for disordered eating. Your goal will be to identify if someone has disordered eating or an eating disorder. If they do not, you want to help them build a healthy, normal eating pattern and not develop disordered eating patterns as a result of their desire to lose weight or manage their weight. Recognize that obesity and eating disorders share many common characteristics, including dieting, fasting, skipping meals, a lack of awareness of hunger and satiety cues. Sometimes people are eating out of habit and they continue eating until the portion has been consumed, not until they feel full. Anxiety is also a shared characteristic, as well as a family environment and a distorted body image. A great resource for you to use when you're helping clients try to develop healthy eating patterns to control the energy in side of the equation is to use the U.S. Dietary Guidelines. These are science-based recommendations that are updated every 5 years. And right now they have very simple intentions to prevent chronic diseases and to reduce obesity. The U.S. Dietary Guidelines have 4 primary goals. Number 1, follow a healthy eating pattern. Number 2, limit intake of added sugars, saturated fats, and sodium. Number 3, focus on intakes that include variety, nutrient density, and portion size. And number 4, make a shift to healthier choices. When you are helping people create healthier eating patterns, you may find that goal number 3, focus on variety, nutrient density, and portion size, becomes one of the goals that you focus on the most. Variety means different types of foods. It means different types of macronutrients. It means meals that contain carbohydrates, proteins, and healthy fats. And it also means different types of varieties within each of those 3 categories of macronutrients. Carbohydrates include fruits, vegetables, starchy and non-starchy vegetables, whole grains, and breads. Protein includes fish, poultry, meat, dairy products, beans, and there's even a small amount of protein in some vegetables. And healthy fats would include typically your oils and avocados and small amounts, this is where portion size starts to step in, of items like butter and margarine. So it's important to recognize of those 4 goals, you may find that goal number 3, variety, is one that you discuss in great length with clients who are having a goal for weight management. When you are helping clients with that energy inside of the energy balance equation, they may bring to you different diets that they've heard about or seen advertised or had family or friends try that they're interested in considering. And this brings up the confusing issue of diets in general and the issue of fad diets. Remember in this class that each of you researched and disassembled a fad diet. Fad diets are usually pseudoscientific, they're lacking in evidence, and they're often anecdotal. Fad diets tend to be very restrictive and to remove either a food group or a particular food. Those are usually indicators that it's a fad diet and not a healthful approach to eating. When in doubt, go back to the dietary guidelines and look at those 4 goals for a healthy eating pattern. As you're working with these clients and you're focused on the energy inside of the equation, that energy balance equation, it's important to talk about the goals that the client has. Is weight loss the person's only goal? Should weight loss be the person's only goal? It is my hope that as a result of taking this class, you recognize that weight loss should not be the only goal for people with obesity. Improved health should be a goal. In fact, improved health might be the better goal, with weight loss being a secondary goal. That's up for you and the client to decide, but I hope you recognize that health is certainly a goal to include in the program that you write. So, we will end the class by looking one final time at the energy balance equation. Thank you so much for your time today.